Anger is often misunderstood as something destructive that must be eliminated, suppressed, or feared. From an early age, many people are taught that anger is bad, dangerous, or shameful. As a result, they either explode when it becomes too intense or bury it deep inside, hoping it will disappear. Both approaches fail because they treat anger as the enemy. In truth, anger is not the problem. Anger is a signal. It arises to point towards something within you that has not been understood, integrated, or disciplined. Anger does not appear randomly, and it is not injected into you by another person. No word, action, or situation has the power to create anger on its own. If that were true, everyone would react the same way to the same circumstances. Yet one person remains calm while another becomes furious. This alone proves that anger does not originate outside. What happens externally only activates what already exists internally. At its core, anger signals that an expectation has been violated. You expected respect, fairness, obedience, appreciation, or understanding, and reality did not comply. The stronger and more rigid the expectation, the stronger the emotional response when it collapses. Most expectations operate unconsciously. You rarely announce them to yourself or others, yet you suffer deeply when they are not met. Anger arises to reveal these hidden demands. Another root of anger is attachment to control. When you believe you should be able to control how people behave, how events unfold, or how quickly outcomes should appear, frustration is inevitable. Life does not follow personal preferences. People act from their own conditioning, fears, and limitations. When reality refuses to obey your inner script, anger emerges as a protest against the loss of control. The emotion is not saying they are wrong. It is saying, I am resisting what is. Anger also exposes wounded identity. Whenever you strongly identify with being right, respected, competent, or superior, any challenge to that image feels threatening. A careless comment, disagreement, or lack of recognition can feel like a personal attack. Anger then rises as a shield to protect the self-image. In this sense, anger is a defense mechanism. It attempts to restore a sense of power. When the ego feels diminished, the more fragile the identity, the more easily anger is triggered. If anger is treated as an enemy, the real message is missed. Suppressing anger does not dissolve expectations, control, or identity attachment. It only forces the signal underground, where it later re-emerges as resentment, bitterness, passive aggression, or chronic tension. Exploding in anger is equally ineffective. It releases energy temporarily, but strengthens the habit of reaction, making future anger faster and stronger. Understanding anger begins with observation rather than judgment. The moment anger appears, instead of asking, who caused this? Ask, what is this pointing to within me? This shift alone transforms anger from a threat into a teacher. The emotion becomes information. It reveals where awareness is lacking and where inner work is needed. When anger is observed calmly, you may notice that it first arises in the body before it becomes thought or action. There may be heat in the chest, tension in the jaw, tightness in the shoulders, or shallow breathing. These physical sensations are the earliest signals. If they are recognized at this stage, anger loses much of its power. You are no longer inside the emotion, you are witnessing it. This witnessing creates space, and in that space, choice becomes possible. As awareness deepens, the underlying expectation can be seen clearly. You may realize you were demanding appreciation, agreement, or control without ever questioning whether such a demand was realistic or necessary. When the expectation is seen, it begins to loosen. You recognize that peace was conditional upon the world behaving a certain way. This realization alone weakens anger, because the mind understands that the condition was self-created. Anger also teaches humility. It reveals where you still believe the world owes you something. When this belief is dropped, calmness becomes less dependent on external conditions. You may still prefer certain outcomes, but your inner stability no longer collapses when preferences are unmet. Anger then loses its function and naturally subsides. Over time, if anger is consistently met with awareness, it transforms. What once felt like an uncontrollable force becomes a brief signal that arises and dissolves without leaving damage behind. You no longer fear it, and you no longer obey it. You listen, learn, and move on. In this way, anger becomes a guide rather than a disturbance. It points precisely to the areas where freedom has not yet been established. Each time anger arises, it offers an opportunity to release another attachment, soften another expectation, and strengthen inner authority. When the lesson is learned, the teacher no longer needs to shout. True emotional mastery is not the absence of anger, but the absence of confusion about it. When anger is understood, it no longer controls your actions, words, or identity. It becomes a temporary messenger, not a permanent resident, and with each message understood, your inner peace becomes less fragile, more stable, and increasingly independent of the world around you. Most emotional suffering begins with a subtle transfer of power. Without noticing it, you hand authority over your inner state to people, situations, and outcomes. You allow moods, words, and behaviors outside of you to determine how you feel inside. The moment this transfer happens, peace becomes fragile. It must now be protected, negotiated, and defended. Inner authority is lost, and emotional dependency is born. Emotional dependency does not always look weak or needy. Often it hides behind strong opinions, moral certainty, or the demand for respect. You may believe you are simply reacting reasonably to unreasonable behavior. Yet beneath the surface lies the same pattern. I will be calm if others act correctly. I will be at peace if life goes my way. This condition makes your inner world unstable because it is built on factors you cannot control. The foundation of inner authority is the recognition that your emotional state is your responsibility alone. No one else has access to your nervous system, your thoughts, or your meaning-making process unless you allow it. When someone speaks harshly, ignores you, or behaves unfairly, these are external events. The disturbance arises only when you interpret those events as threats to your worth, identity, or expectations. The interpretation, not the event, creates the emotion. When peace depends on others behaving a certain way, every interaction becomes a risk. You unconsciously scan the environment for validation, agreement, and respect. When you receive it, you feel good. When you don't, tension appears. This creates a constant emotional negotiation with the world. Life becomes exhausting because calm is never stable. It must be earned again and again through favorable circumstances. Inner authority reverses this pattern. Instead of asking, "What must others do for me to be at peace?" you ask, "What must I cultivate within myself so that peace is no longer conditional?" This shift is not philosophical, it is practical. It changes how you relate to people, conflict, and uncertainty. At first, reclaiming inner authority can feel uncomfortable. Emotional dependency often disguises itself as connection or sensitivity. You may fear that if you stop reacting, you'll become cold, detached, or indifferent. In reality, the opposite happens. When you are no longer emotionally dependent, you can engage more fully, clearly, and compassionately because your responses are not driven by fear of disturbance. Inner authority does not mean you approve of harmful behavior or remain silent in the face of injustice. It means that your inner stability is not hostage to the behavior you confront. You can speak firmly without anger, set boundaries without resentment, and walk away without bitterness. Action becomes cleaner when it is not fueled by emotional dependency. To develop inner authority, you must first observe where you give it away. Notice moments when your mood shifts because someone disagreed with you, ignored you, or failed to meet your expectations. In these moments, ask yourself, what am I demanding from them right now in exchange for my peace? The answer is often revealing. It may be respect, validation, obedience, or understanding. Seeing this demand clearly weakens its grip. Another essential step is reducing identification with emotional states. Many people unconsciously define themselves by how they feel. I am angry, I'm offended, I'm hurt. When emotions become identity, they feel permanent and justified. Inner authority arises when you recognize emotions as temporary states, not definitions of self. You experience them, but you are not ruled by them. Discipline supports this process. Without discipline, insight remains theoretical. Discipline of breath steadies the nervous system. Discipline of speech prevents regret. Discipline of thought interrupts repetitive narratives that fuel emotional reactions. These practices create internal structure, making calmness resilient rather than accidental. As inner authority strengthens, emotional independence naturally follows. You stop seeking permission from the world to feel okay. Praise no longer inflates you, and criticism no longer collapses you. This does not mean you become immune to feedback. It means feedback informs you without destabilizing you. You can learn without suffering. Emotional independence also deepens relationships. When you no longer rely on others to regulate your emotions, interactions become lighter and more honest. You stop manipulating, pleasing, or withdrawing to protect your inner state. You meet people as they are, not as emotional providers or threats. This creates mutual respect rather than emotional entanglement. Unshakable calm is not the absence of challenge, it is stability within challenge. Life will continue to present unpredictability, conflict, and loss. Inner authority does not eliminate these experiences. It ensures they do not dismantle you from within. When calm comes from inside, it cannot be taken by circumstances, opinions, or behavior. Ultimately, inner authority is a return of ownership. You reclaim the right to decide how you relate to experience. This decision is made repeatedly, not once. Each time you choose response over reaction, responsibility over blame, and awareness over habit, authority returns to where it belongs. When peace no longer depends on others behaving correctly, it becomes reliable. When calm is no longer negotiated with the world, it becomes natural. This is the foundation of emotional independence. And from this foundation, true freedom emerges. Many people believe calmness is something you either have or you don't. They assume some people are naturally peaceful, while others are simply hot-tempered, reactive, or emotional. This belief removes responsibility and places calmness in the category of luck or genetics. In reality, calmness is not a personality trait. It is a trained capacity. Like strength, balance, or endurance, it is developed through consistent discipline. Without training, emotional reactions dominate. With training, space appears between stimulus and response. Emotional reactions feel powerful because they move faster than conscious thought. A word is spoken, a gesture is perceived, an event unfolds, and before the mind has time to evaluate, the body is already reacting. The heart rate increases, muscles tense, breathing shortens, and thoughts accelerate. In this state, choice disappears. You are not responding, you are being carried. Discipline slows this process down and restores choice. The first layer of discipline is the breath. Breath is the most direct bridge between the body and the mind. When emotions rise, breathing becomes shallow and irregular. This signals the nervous system that there is a threat even when none exists. Without awareness, this pattern repeats automatically. Through disciplined breathing, you interrupt this cycle. Slow, steady breaths activate the body's calming response, reducing emotional intensity before it turns into action. This is not suppression, it is regulation. Breath discipline works because it creates space. That space may only be a few seconds at first, but even a few seconds are enough to prevent regret. In that brief pause, emotional energy loses momentum. What once felt urgent becomes manageable. Over time, this pause expands, and emotional reactions no longer feel overwhelming. The second layer of discipline is attention. Where attention goes, energy follows. When attention is undisciplined, the mind fixates on provoking thoughts, interpretations, judgments, imagined insults, and future scenarios. Each thought feeds the emotion, strengthening it. Attention discipline means noticing when the mind is fueling the fire and consciously redirecting it. This does not mean forcing positivity or denial. It means refusing to rehearse mental narratives that intensify emotional disturbance. Training attention requires repetition. At first, you will notice emotional thoughts only after they have already multiplied. With practice, you catch them earlier. You begin to see the first thought rather than the 10th. This early detection weakens emotional reactions significantly because emotions gain power through repetition, not through a single thought. The third layer of discipline is response. Even when emotions arise, you are not required to express them immediately. Discipline of response means choosing when, how, or whether to act. Many conflicts escalate not because of the initial emotion, but because of undisciplined expression. Words spoken under emotional pressure often create consequences that last far longer than the emotion itself. Response discipline includes silence. Silence is not avoidance, it is timing. When the inner state is disturbed, speaking usually serves the emotion rather than clarity. Waiting until the mind settles allows response to be aligned with intention rather than impulse. This practice alone prevents countless conflicts and regrets. Discipline does not remove emotion. It removes domination by emotion. You still feel irritation, frustration, or disappointment, but these states no longer control behavior. Emotional energy passes through without leaving damage behind. This is the difference between being calm and being suppressed. Suppression traps energy inside. Discipline allows it to move without destruction. As discipline deepens, emotional space becomes stable. Situations that once triggered immediate reactions now feel distant, almost slower. You notice emotions rising without urgency to act on them. This space is not created by force, it is created by familiarity. The more often you practice discipline, the more the nervous system learns that not every stimulus is a threat. Over time, this training changes your relationship with emotion entirely. Emotions become information rather than commands. They inform you about your internal state, but they no longer dictate your actions. You listen, adjust, and continue with clarity. Discipline also builds trust in yourself. When you consistently respond with control and awareness, confidence grows. You no longer fear your own reactions or avoid situations to protect your peace. Calmness becomes reliable, not dependent on ideal conditions. You can enter difficult conversations, stressful environments, or uncertain situations without losing balance. This is why calmness must be trained daily, not only in moments of crisis. Training when things are easy prepares you for when they are not. Breath awareness, attention control, and conscious response practiced in ordinary moments build the foundation for stability under pressure. Ultimately, discipline creates freedom. Without discipline, emotions dictate behavior, and behavior creates consequences that limit your life. With discipline, emotional reactions lose their authority, and you regain choice. Calmness is no longer something you hope for, it becomes something you embody. Through disciplined practice, emotional space becomes your default state. In that space, wisdom operates naturally, and reactions no longer rule. This is not a special talent reserved for a few. It is a capacity available to anyone willing to train. Most people believe freedom means being able to say or do whatever they feel in the moment. They confuse expression with liberation and reaction with honesty. In reality, this misunderstanding keeps them trapped. When behavior is dictated by impulse, emotion, or habit, there is no freedom, only predictability. True freedom begins not with expression, but with choice, and choice exists only in the space between stimulus and response. A stimulus is anything that reaches you from the outside, a word, a look, a message, an event, or a situation. A reaction is automatic. It happens without permission, driven by conditioning, past experience, and emotional memory. A response, however, is conscious. It is selected rather than triggered. Mastery lies in this distinction. The goal is not to eliminate anger, frustration, or discomfort, but to prevent them from hijacking your behavior. Suppression is often mistaken for control. When people suppress anger, they push it down while maintaining a calm appearance. Internally, however, the emotion continues to operate. It builds pressure, distorts perception, and eventually leaks out through passive aggression, resentment, or sudden outbursts. Suppression avoids expression but does not create freedom. The emotion still dictates the inner experience. Reaction, on the other hand, expresses emotion immediately and without restraint. While it may feel honest or relieving, it also removes responsibility. Words are spoken, actions are taken, and consequences follow, often irreversible. Reaction gives emotion full authority over behavior. Again, freedom is absent. Response occupies the middle path. It acknowledges emotion without obeying it. You allow the feeling to arise, observe it clearly, and then decide how to act. This decision may involve speaking, setting a boundary, or taking no action at all. The key is that the action is aligned with intention, not impulse. The space between stimulus and response is subtle but trainable. At first, it may feel like a fraction of a second. Yet even a brief pause is enough to change everything. In that pause, you regain authorship of your behavior. You are no longer being pushed forward by emotion, you are stepping forward deliberately. The space is often lost because emotions move through the body faster than conscious thought. The nervous system reacts before logic arrives. Training awareness of bodily signals restores the pause. Tightness, heat, or accelerated breathing are early indicators that reaction is approaching. Recognizing these signs allows intervention before behavior occurs. Freedom grows as this awareness becomes consistent. You begin to recognize emotional patterns before they fully form. Situations that once provoked immediate reactions now present choices. You realize that not every stimulus requires a response, and not every response must be immediate. Choosing a response does not mean choosing passivity. Sometimes the most conscious response is firm, direct, or corrective. The difference lies in inner state. When response comes from clarity rather than agitation, it carries authority without aggression. Words are measured. Actions are precise. The message is delivered without unnecessary harm. As this capacity develops, anger loses its dominance. It still arises, but it no longer controls timing, tone, or outcome. Anger becomes information rather than fuel. You may recognize that something is unacceptable or misaligned, but the way you address it is chosen rather than forced. Freedom from reaction also frees you from regret. Many of life's most painful consequences come not from what happened but from how one reacted. A single impulsive moment can damage relationships, reputation, or self-respect. When response replaces reaction, integrity is preserved even in conflict. This practice also changes how you perceive others. When you stop reacting automatically, you stop personalizing everything. You see that much of what people do is driven by their own conditioning and emotional states. This understanding creates distance without detachment. You engage without entanglement. Over time, the space between stimulus and response becomes a stable inner environment. Calmness is no longer something you chase, it becomes the ground from which action arises. Even in emotionally charged situations, there is a sense of internal stillness. From that stillness, wise action becomes natural. True mastery is not emotional numbness, it is emotional clarity. You feel fully, but you act selectively. This balance is the essence of freedom. You're no longer compelled by every impulse, nor are you constrained by suppression. You are guided by awareness. Freedom, then, is not found in controlling the world or silencing emotion. It is found in governing yourself. Each time you choose response over reaction, you strengthen this inner governance. Over time, it becomes effortless. Between what happens and what you do lies the most valuable territory you will ever inhabit. In that space, you are not the product of circumstance or habit. You are the author of your actions. And in authorship, true freedom exists.